Look, I have to tell someone this. Anyone. Because my life isn't just a mess anymore, it's a smoking crater. And I honestly don't know how to even begin to explain it. My name is Corinne. I'm 44, and my past just clawed its way into the present to burn down everything I've ever loved. You know that saying, what goes around comes around? It's a lie. It's the kind of comforting garbage people tell themselves to make sense of the world. Because I have been paying for one single mistake for 24 years. And now, the bill has come due in the most twisted way imaginable. 24 years ago, I was engaged to a man named Gideon. And yes, I cheated on him. But here's the part no one ever wants to hear. The part that doesn't fit into their neat little boxes of right and wrong. Sometimes life isn't black and white. Sometimes you're drowning, and you grab onto the first hand that reaches for you, even if it's not the one you're supposed to be holding. I was 20 years old, pregnant, and absolutely, gut-wrenchingly terrified. Gideon, he was always so intense. Even back then, he had our entire lives mapped out in his head, these grand, sweeping blueprints for a future I could barely see past breakfast the next morning. When I told him I was pregnant, he didn't see my fear, he saw a project. He shifted into this full-on provider mode, talking about wedding venues and baby names as if my positive pregnancy test was just the starting pistol for a race he was determined to win. But I wasn't ready. I was a child myself, working a dead-end waitressing job, sharing a tiny apartment with a roommate. I was supposed to become a wife? A mother? The pressure was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until I couldn't breathe. That's when Reed came into the picture. He was a line cook at the diner where I worked. And he listened. When I spoke about being scared, Gideon would just pat my hand and say, "Don't worry, Corinne, we'll figure it out." He wasn't listening to my fear, he was silencing it. But Reed, he understood that sometimes you just need to sit with the fear. You need to let it have its space before you can even think about moving forward. He didn't judge me. He didn't try to fix me. So, yeah, things happened between us. It wasn't some cold, calculated affair. It wasn't the malicious betrayal that Gideon likes to paint it as. It was me, a scared kid, trying to find a moment of quiet in a hurricane. It was a mistake born from desperation. The whole paternity situation after that, it was a mess. But that wasn't entirely my fault. I genuinely wasn't sure who the father was at first. The timeline was complicated. And uncertainty is not the same thing as a lie. But Gideon saw it that way. When we finally got the test results, and they showed that Sloane, my beautiful Sloane, wasn't his, he shattered. He didn't just get angry, he detonated. He had this massive, screaming fight with Reed in the diner parking lot, made a scene that the whole town talked about for months, and then, he was gone. Just gone. Packed up his life and moved across the country. No attempt to work things out, no goodbye. He just vanished, leaving me to deal with a newborn and the wreckage of 3 lives all by myself. Reed, to his credit, stepped up. For a while, he helped me raise Sloane for the first 7 years of her life. I thought we were building a family on the rubble of our mistakes. But then, through some random, cruel twist of fate, a medical issue that required family history, he found out he wasn't her biological father, either. And just like Gideon, he couldn't handle it. Another man who claimed to love us, until reality became inconvenient. Then he bailed, too. So there I was, a single mother to a 7-year-old girl, with no support system. Everyone in our small town had an opinion. I was the town screw-up, the woman who'd hurt 2 good men. No one ever seemed to wonder how I was holding it all together. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. I made sure Sloane never wanted for anything. I built a life for us, a fortress for 2, brick by brick. I told her we didn't need anyone else, that we were stronger as a team. And for 24 years, we were. She grew up to be smart, and beautiful, and so fiercely independent. I thought we had made it. I thought the ghosts of the past were finally buried. Shows how wrong I was. Pause. Last month, there was this impromptu high school reunion at the community center. I usually avoid those things like the plague. They're just showcases for perfect lives I never had. But my friend coaxed me into going. It'll be fun, she said. And for a little while, it was. Just small talk, catching up. People were polite, asking about Sloane, telling me how proud I must be. And I am. God, I am so proud of her. I was actually starting to relax. Until I saw him. Across the room. Gideon. After 24 years. There he was. And he looked successful. You know that look? The expensive suit that hangs just right? The confident posture? The way other people seem to gravitate toward them, orbiting their success. That was Gideon now. For a second, I thought about just leaving. Just slipping out the back door. But then I thought, no. We're adults now. I'm not that scared 20-year-old girl anymore. Maybe it was time to clear the air. So I walked over. I kept it light, friendly. Gideon, wow, it's been a long time. Lun. He was polite, but guarded. Every word felt measured, like he was talking to a business rival he didn't trust. I asked about his work. He answered vaguely. I mentioned he looked well. He gave a tight smile. He didn't ask a single question about me. The rudeness of it stung. Here I was, trying to be mature, and he couldn't even feign interest. I mentioned that Sloane was around somewhere, that she'd grown up into an amazing young woman. When I said her name, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Something else. Something I couldn't read. I suggested maybe we could grab coffee while he was in town, just to finally put the past to rest. He gave me that same polite, empty smile. I don't really see the point in rehashing old history, Corinne. Fine. Whatever. I walked away, trying to shake off the chill he'd left behind. Later that evening, as I was getting ready to leave, I saw her, Sloane, sitting at a corner table, leaning in, deep in conversation with someone. It was Gideon. They were talking so intently. Her hands were moving as she spoke, a kind of animation I hadn't seen in her for months. And he was listening, truly listening, like what she was saying was the most important thing in the world. The scene made my stomach clench. What could they possibly be talking about? The conversation went on for at least 15 minutes. When they finally stood up, I saw it happen. They exchanged phone numbers, like they were planning to stay in touch. I waited until Gideon left, then walked over to Sloane. What was that all about? She just shrugged, a casualness that felt completely fake. We were just talking, about old times. He seems like a nice guy. Nice. The man who had abandoned us. The man who treated me like a stranger not an hour ago. Suddenly, he was nice. A cold dread, heavy and certain, settled in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't the end of an old story. It was the beginning of a new one. A much, much darker one. The shift was subtle at first. So subtle I thought I might be imagining it, that my own paranoia from seeing Gideon was coloring everything. It started with her phone. Sloane had always been an open book. We were best friends as much as we were mother and daughter. Her phone would lie on the coffee table, buzzing with messages from friends, and she'd laugh and show me the funny memes or complain about her day. But now, her phone was always with her, glued to her hand or screened down on the table. She was texting constantly, this little secretive smile playing on her lips. Whenever I entered the room, her fingers would stop, and the phone would quickly get tucked away. Who are you talking to so much these days? I asked one evening, trying to sound casual, breezy. Oh, just a friend from the reunion, she said, her eyes not quite meeting mine as she changed the subject to what we should have for dinner. A friend from the reunion. My blood ran cold. Then came the phone calls. She started taking them in her room, with the door closed. I'd hear the low murmur of her voice, but if I walked past her doorway, it would immediately fall silent until I was gone. The defensiveness was the worst part. How was your day, honey? A simple, normal question I'd asked her thousands of times. Fine, she'd snap, her shoulders tense. Why are you always asking me so many questions? It felt like walking on eggshells in my own home. The easy comfort we'd shared for 2 decades was evaporating, replaced by a tense, fragile silence. I knew with a certainty that terrified me that Gideon was the one on the other end of those texts and calls. But what was he saying? What could he possibly be telling her that was turning my daughter into a stranger before my very eyes? I tried to warn her, gently at first. You know, Sloane, Gideon has a complicated history with our family, I said one afternoon while we were washing dishes. He's not always the person he appears to be. She stopped wiping a plate and gave me a look. A hard look. What's that supposed to mean? That I can't make my own judgments about people? No, of course not. It's just, he hurt us very badly a long time ago. He left. He chose to leave. I just don't want you to get the wrong impression. Well, she said, placing the dish in the rack with a sharp clink. Maybe he had his reasons. Maybe he had his reasons. The words hit me like a slap. In all her life, Sloane had never once questioned the fundamental story of our family. That we were a team because the men who were supposed to be there had left. Now, after a few conversations with a man she'd just met, she was questioning everything. He was poisoning her, systematically, drip by drip, and I was completely powerless to stop it. Every attempt I made to protect her was twisted and framed as me being controlling. Every warning I gave was seen as me being jealous or insecure. The very foundation of trust we had built our lives on was cracking, and I could feel my daughter slipping through my fingers. Things came to a head about 2 weeks after the reunion. Sloane had started going out more often, dressed up nicer than usual. She was always meeting a friend. She never said who. She'd come home late, energized and distant, and disappear into her room. I couldn't take it anymore. The not knowing was eating me alive. One evening, I sat her down at the kitchen table. My heart was pounding. Sloane, we need to talk. Seriously. She crossed her arms, her expression already defensive. About what? About Gideon, I said, my voice softer than I intended. I'm worried about you. He abandoned us when you were a baby. He chose to walk away from his responsibilities. He isn't a reliable person. I expected annoyance. I expected her to roll her eyes. I did not expect the pure, unadulterated anger that flashed across her face. Abandoned us? She scoffed. A bitter, ugly sound? Or abandoned you? I recoiled. What are you talking about? I've been talking to him, Mom. A lot. He's been telling me things. His side of the story. My breath caught in my throat. His side. There is no his side, Sloane. There is only what happened. Oh. Really? Her voice was dripping with sarcasm. Then why did you never tell me you cheated on him? Why did you never tell me you weren't even sure who my father was? Why did you let me believe my whole life that these 2 good men just up and left for no reason? The questions were like bullets. Each one found its mark. He had told her everything. Not just the facts, but the facts twisted and sharpened into weapons. I was 20 years old and scared. I pleaded, my voice cracking. It was complicated. I was trying to protect you from all of this. Protect me? She laughed. A hollow, humorless sound that didn't sound like my daughter at all. Or, protect yourself? You controlled the narrative, Mom. You made yourself the victim and him the villain because it was easier than admitting you messed up. You destroyed his chance at having a family. That is not what happened. He's twisting everything. Is he? She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. Is he twisting the fact that you lied about the paternity test timeline? Is he twisting the fact that you were with 2 men at the same time? He said you played them both. That you ruined his life, and then you did the exact same thing to Reed. I stared at her, speechless. He had taken every complex, messy, painful detail of my past and presented it to her in the worst possible light. He had painted me as a manipulative monster. And she believed him. My own daughter believed a virtual stranger over the woman who had raised her. Sloane, Honey, you're not getting the full story. I think for the first time in my life, I am. She cut me off, her voice cold as ice. I'm done listening to your lies. I deserve to know the truth about where I come from. And he's the only one willing to tell me. The conversation was over. She stood up and walked to her room, shutting the door behind her with a soft, final click. I sat there at the kitchen table, the room spinning around me. The cracks in our foundation hadn't just widened. The entire structure had just collapsed, and I was buried in the rubble. The weeks that followed were a special kind of hell. A cold war fought in the silent hallways of our own home. Sloane was barely speaking to me. She'd come home from work, grab food, and retreat to her room. When she did look at me, it was with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of pity and contempt. It was like she was studying a stranger, and she didn't like what she saw. I knew Gideon was pulling the strings. I could feel his influence in every cold shoulder, every dismissive comment. He was turning her against me, meticulously, patiently. She started staying out later, sometimes not coming home until the next morning. When I'd ask where she'd been, she'd give me some dramatic, vague answer like, getting answers to questions I should have asked years ago. It felt like the ultimate betrayal. I had sacrificed everything for her. My own dreams, my youth, my chance at finding another partner. I had poured every ounce of my being into being her mother. And she was choosing him. A man who had been a ghost her entire life. I started to wonder if this was his plan all along. Was this his long-awaited revenge? To wait until Sloane was old enough, then swoop in and steal her away from me, turning my own daughter into his weapon. The thought made me physically sick. Then it happened. The thing that proved just how monstrous his plan really was. It was a Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work, a hollowed-out, automated routine. My phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. A direct message. I opened it, and my world ended. It was a photo. Sent as a disappearing message, designed to vanish after being viewed, but the image was burned into my mind forever. It was Sloane and Gideon, in what was clearly a hotel room. They were in bed together, covered only by a white sheet pulled up to their chests. They were both naked, it was unmistakable. They were looking at the camera, smiling. Not just smiling, they had these satisfied, triumphant expressions, like they had just accomplished something monumental. And the caption beneath the photo read, "I can finally call him Daddy." Long pause. I stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process it. The words didn't make sense. The image didn't make sense. My daughter, my Sloane, my baby girl, with Gideon. The man who was supposed to marry me. The man who could have been her stepfather. They were. I couldn't even form the thought. The photo vanished, as it was designed to do, but it was too late. It was seared onto the inside of my eyelids. This wasn't just rebellion. This wasn't some misguided search for a father figure. This was calculated. This was cruel. This was his endgame. He had manipulated my daughter into being the ultimate weapon in his revenge plot against me. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold my phone. I called Sloane's number. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Again and again and again. On the 10th try, she answered. "What do you want?" Her voice was calm, eerily calm. I could barely speak. The words came out in a strangled gasp. "Where are you? What was that photo?" "Sloane, do you have any idea what you've done?" "I'm exactly where I want to be," she said, her tone detached, cold. "Doing exactly what I want to do. Do you understand how sick this is? How twisted? He's using you, Sloane. He's using you to get back at me." And then she laughed. A bitter, hollow sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "You're the last person on earth who should be talking about sick and twisted behavior, Mom." That's when he got on the phone. Gideon. His voice was so smooth, so friendly, it made my skin crawl. "Corinne? I hope you understand this isn't really about you anymore. This is about Sloane, finally learning the truth. You're disgusting, I spat, tears of rage and horror streaming down my face. Using my daughter to get revenge on me is the most pathetic thing I've ever witnessed. He just chuckled, a low, self-satisfied sound. I'm not using anyone. Sloane is a grown woman. She made her own choices, once she knew the truth about her mother. The phone was passed back. It was Sloane's voice again, delivering the final, killing blow. He's right, she said. And the next words shattered what was left of my world into a million pieces. I'm leaving town, Mom. The words were flat, devoid of any emotion. It was as if she were telling me she was going to the grocery store, not that she was about to excise herself from my life. Leaving? I stammered, my mind still reeling from the photo, from Gideon's voice. What do you mean, leaving? Where are you going? Away from here, she said. Away from this town where everyone knows our family's messy history. I'm tired of being known as the bastard child, as Corinne's mistake. I'm going somewhere to start fresh. My heart seized with a desperate, fleeting hope. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Okay. We can do that. We can go together. We can move anywhere you want, Sloane. Just come home first. We can talk this through. There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by that same, cold laugh. You don't get it, do you? I'm not going with you. I'm going with him. Him. The word hung in the air between us, an immovable object. Sloane, please, I begged, the last vestiges of my pride crumbling into dust. You can't do this. He doesn't love you. This is a game to him. This is his way of destroying me. Can't you see that? The only person who has ever been completely honest with me is Gideon, she retorted, her voice hard as steel. He's the only one who understands what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you trusted. You had 23 years to tell me the full truth about everything. Instead, you fed me a fairy tale about being abandoned by men who didn't care. Now I know better. Her words were rehearsed. I could hear Gideon's influence, his coaching, in every syllable. He had armed her with his version of our history, and she was now firing it back at me point blank. I'm making a choice, she continued, her voice gaining a chilling resolve. I'm choosing to be with someone who values honesty over protecting someone's fragile feelings. My feelings aren't fragile, Sloane. I'm your mother. Then you should understand why I have to do this. I need to build a healthy relationship, without the toxicity of our past hanging over everything. Our past. It was no longer my past. It was a shared toxicity that she was pinning on me, a disease she needed to escape from. Don't contact us anymore, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I need space. I need time. Sloane, don't do this. Please, baby, don't hang up. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. It was over. In the span of a single morning, my entire life, the life I had sacrificed everything to build, had been systematically dismantled and destroyed. He hadn't just taken my daughter. He had convinced her to hand him the matches and light the fire herself. I sank to the floor, the phone clattering from my numb fingers. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. The 6 months that followed were a slow, agonizing descent. The initial shock gave way to a persistent, gnawing ache in my chest that never went away. Nikki, my Sloane, she kept her word. She blocked me on everything. Her phone number was disconnected. Her social media profiles vanished, or at least, they became invisible to me. I was a ghost to my own child. Driven by a desperation that bordered on madness, I hired a private investigator. I had to know if she was safe. I had to know where they went. It cost